So in this recording, I'm going to talk to you about nudge theory, which comes from a branch of economics known as behavioural economics. So bit of background here. So the idea comes from an economist, Richard Thaler, and as I said, it comes from behavioural economics, but also behavioural sciences. And the idea is that you basically subtly nudge people to make decisions which are either positive for them or positive for wider society. And it's done through a process of positive reinforcement and sometimes indirect suggestions that influence behaviour. And the idea is it should make it easier for people to make certain positive decisions. So I've got an example there of not driving to an event as there's no car parking. So you know before you set off that there isn't going to be somewhere to park the car, and therefore you opt to use public transport. There are various national policy examples which aren't particularly event related, well, not at all event related, but for instance, there was a switch in the way that pensions were set up in the UK a few years ago, and now any employee is automatically enrolled in a pension in the UK, and this was actually to stop people not having pensions and the problems that caused later in life. And there's examples as well of the organ donation. So in Spain, it has an opt-out scheme, so everyone is automatically an organ donor. And if you don't want to be an organ donor, you have to opt out. And this has been talked about for quite a long time in the UK as well. But at the moment, we have the opposite. You have to opt in to be an organ donor, and therefore a lot of people don't bother or get round to doing it. And Department for Transport in the UK, they've tried various nudge strategies to get people to use their cars less, but they haven't actually always been that successful. Now, and as I said at the bottom there are quite a lot of criticisms of nudge theory because it's not always successful, and I'll show you some examples in a moment of where it doesn't work so well. So, sorry about this slide with lots and lots of sort of text on, but it's taken from the Rare and Behavioural Insights team. And in your reading list, there is a link to their website and one of their documentation. And this used to be called the Nudge Unit in the government department. It's now branched out, and it's a non-for-profit company. But it's basically an organisation that develops sort of these kind of nudge strategies to enable behaviour change. But they've come up with these 15 strategies. And what I've done is, rather than go through all of these, I've picked out some in red that apply to some event examples I want to use. So they're grouped under motivating the change, socialising the change, and easing the change. But if we look first of all at motivating the change, an example here I'd want to give would be Boomtown Festival. Now, what Boomtown Festival did a couple of years ago was it started trying to address the problem of people leaving behind a lot of waste on site and leaving behind their tents. And in their marketing materials from a couple of years ago, when they were actually sending out information to people with tickets, they started talking about the taking home tents and not leaving rubbish quite a long time before the event. So they were sending messages to people, and what they were trying to do was these first two things there. They were trying to leverage positive emotions and frame messages to people's personal values, identities and interests. So they were talking in terms of, you wouldn't want to be the person who would leave their tent, and how important it is for the environment and wildlife, etc., to not do this kind of thing. So they were trying to motivate the change in advance, and through that they were socialising the change. So number 6 there, they were promoting a desirable norm, and number 7 they were encouraging public and peer-to-peer commitments. So that actually on the site, because other people were taking their tents with them, it would encourage everybody else, and there might be kind of negative views of people who didn't take their tents home with them. So that's one of the things they did, and there's evidence they were quite successful. I haven't got the before and after photos here, I'm afraid, but there are some really good before and after from previous years, and then last year, in terms of the number of people who took their tents home with them. Then over the right hand side, there's some examples that probably best fit Glastonbury Festival. So number 12 there, provide support with planning and implementation of intentions. Well, this is actually something that Glastonbury Festival did with all the groups that come in and run bars and cafes at the site. And one of the things they wanted to do was to get all the bars and cafes to recycle. And they provide lots of support and planning with implementations of these intentions. But I'll show you in a moment, because I had a student do a project on this. It wasn't always successful. And then number 14, one of the things that Glastonbury did last year was alter the choice setting, and they did this in relation to the water bottles. So there was going to be no plastic bottles available at site. People had to bring or purchase their own water bottle and refill it, and so they completely altered the choice setting to actually avoid, lots of single-use plastic water bottles being bought. And I've got on the bottom there a question about why this might not work if you want people to take tent homes. So going back to what Boomtown were trying to do. So they had a lot of success, but it wasn't 100% successful. Now, some of the issues here are that at the time when people come to take their tent home, they've been at a festival for 3 days, they are exhausted, they've been drinking, they've probably been consuming other drugs, they might be still a bit drunk, they might also be very hungover. The idea of trying to take your tent home at that point might just collapse around you because it just becomes too difficult. So, that's where these kind of problems come in. So there's various things that often have an impact on these nudge strategies, and people don't therefore carry out behaviour. So the example I've got from Glastonbury about the managing recycling of festival bars, a student who did a dissertation on this about 3 years ago now, he worked at a festival bar where they were, the whole plan was set up for them to recycle, and they have had different containers for the plastic, the glass, the cans, etc. And it was said it was absolutely fine when it was busy, but what tended to happen when it got really busy is that staff suddenly couldn't cope with the sorting of the items. They often were not able to empty the bins quickly enough. And what tended to happen is when they've got a big queue and they're being hassled by people, they just chuck things in the nearest bin. And even the managers who were supposed to be implementing this recycling policy, they just prioritise serving the customers. And there's other research in hospitality settings and other events venues which shows the same things happen. So that although there's actually a policy in place, that is what's supposed to be happening at that venue, it doesn't always take place. So things for you to go and do now. You can go and actually have a look at the Behavioural Insights team's website, and you can look at their publications section and just pick one that interests you and have a read. In the seminar next week, we're going to be looking at how we can influence consumers' environmental practices at events. And this is something as well that you might want to think about in relation to assignment 1.